Hey guys, Mike was Gettin Greasy Garage, and this weekend's project is a close personal friend of mine. This is 2009 GMC Sierra 1500. It's a half-ton four-wheel drive, and we plucked out the engine. So it's got a 6L80 trans. I'll give you the backstory on it. So a month ago, I was driving it, and motor started clanking and clacking. Here's the 5.3. This has the displacement on demand, or AFM as it's known, for fuel management. So it's like basically like the old Cadillac 468. And one of the lifters collapsed, and which is a common problem. This thing has 230,000 miles on it, so it actually lasted a lot longer before it had problems. Anyway, in the truck we had pulled this head off, replaced the lifters, new head gasket, put everything back together, and he drove it for a little bit. At the time we did this, he was on an extreme budget, and so I was only able to do the one side. Well, subsequently, this side of the engine failed. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. We're going to strip everything out of there, turn this into a standard 5.3, get rid of the DOD. Got all new head bolts, gasket set, everything else. Got a Bryan Tooley Racing Truck Norris cam to put in it. New lifters, new head bolts. So all new gaskets. One of the other issues with this, and the reason for pulling it, besides it's a pain in the ass to tighten head bolts in the engine compartment. Sorry about that there. I'm choking. Anyway, the rear main seal is leaking really bad in this, and the front seal is also leaking. So decided to pull it out. That way we could re-gasket and reseal the whole motor, put a new oil pump on it, timing set. The other cylinder head has a broken exhaust bolt, typical LS. And I don't know, that's pretty much about it. I've got it hanging on a cherry picker right now. I'm going to strip the manifolds and stuff off of it and get it on the stand and get it opened up, and when I get to that point I'll show you guys what you find when you have a messed up DOD lifter. So stay tuned and be back in a blink. Alright guys, well, I told you I'd bring you back when I got the engine all apart and stuff. We're going to find out what really is clanking around inside of here. Before I get into that, just want to touch up on something that I ran into, wasn't familiar with, and it'll save you the same hassle, because here we are on a Sunday trying to find the parts we need so that we can get this thing done. So we're doing a cam swap in this. We're using the BTR or Bryan Tooley Racing Truck Norris cam, and this is an 09, so it's the Gen 4, but it has a cam sensor in the front cover. They moved it from the back of the block up to the front cover, which is okay. Now the dilemma comes in is that the stock cam has a single bolt, and the new cam has 3 bolts. So you have to find the right gear. They have a conversion kit for this with bolts in the right gear that has 3 bolts. Make sure of what you got before you go order a timing set. Whether that cam sensor is at the back of the block, like the early Gen 4s and all the Gen 3s, or like this one, it's moved to the front cover, and you're not scrambling around trying to find a 3-bolt gear with the 4 notches on it, the 4 timing marks for the cam sensor. So let's get into why this thing's clanking. And like I said before, we've already had this side apart because one of the DOD lifters failed. So I'll go ahead and pop that one off out of the way. We'll check it real quick. Everything's still good there, so that was the side we did. Now we'll check the side we didn't do. And again, this was a financial issue that sometimes you have to do what you have to do. So that one feels kind of loose. I don't know. I think we're going to have to dig deeper into this, but I think it's this one here. So we'll get deeper into this and I'll bring you guys back. Alright guys, so I got all the valve train apart. I went ahead and pulled the head bolts. So we'll go ahead and lift the head off. Screwdriver here. How come it is when you have everything laid out and all prepared, you can't never get everything you need? Okay. Everything looks pretty good. Our cylinders. Get our head gasket off here. And we'll come back to this and inspect it. Right now I'm just trying to find the culprit of our noise. 8s and 10s, 8s and 10s. It's an LS. You never know what you're going to get. I think it just depended on how hungover the guy was that was putting it together. If you don't have a small little 12-volt impact like this, get you one. This thing is a time saver, especially with an engine teardown. Okay. Well, pull the lifter trays out. Now on this, we're specifically looking at the AFM lifters for failure. Which I think is obviously the end ones. These lifters get a little bit of oil residue built up in the lifter bore. So you just kind of work them back and forth with a magnet. So it's the end ones that are the AFM lifters. So I'm just getting these out for now. I'll come back to them in a minute. Okay. Well, those look okay. Nothing. Usually this will be pushed in and collapsed if they're bad. Yeah. Still not seeing a smoking gun. Alright, well, I'm going to continue. I'm going to go ahead and get the other head off and see where we're at, and we'll bring you guys back when I know something else. Still looking for the source of the sound. See you guys soon. Well guys, okay, so you saw in some of their video already, got the engine out of the 09 GMC Sierra 5.3 with displacement on demand or automatic fuel management. And It's kind of like the old Cadillac system where it reduced it from 8 to 6 to 4 cylinders. That engine's also flex fuel, but the flex fuel thing doesn't matter on this. So I'll kind of do the backstory and then bring it to where we're at. And I unfortunately don't have some of the other parts I need to show you because everything's at the machine shop. So, a month ago or so, buddy calls me. His engine is clacking in his truck. I isolate it to passenger side of the engine, and I find one of these lifters. This is the displacement on-demand lifter, which I'll get to how they work in a minute. I found that it was collapsed. This part was collapsed down. The spring was compressed, and this lifter was stuck, which basically allows the push rod to flop around in there like a hot dog in a hallway. And it had a mess. It had a bunch of engine codes. Well, if you know anything about these DOD motors, these things are prone to failure. These lifters. He got 230,000 miles out of it before it failed, so you know that's pretty good. Anyway, on an extremely tight budget, you know, laid off this time of year from construction. And so says, you know, can we fix it as cheap as possible to get back on the road? And I said, yeah, we can do that. So what we did is the cam was, everything was good on the cam. And so we went ahead and got 4 of these style lifters to replace the ones on that side of the engine. So how this works is there's 2 cylinders on each side of the engine that use this style, and then 2 that use the regular LS style roller lifter. So on the passenger side of the block, the right hand side of that block, we replaced the 4 of these. And you know, you have to put a new head gasket on because of course you got to pull the head to get these out. Cleaned everything up, put it back together. He got it running. He finished putting it together. Had a vacuum leak, stuff like that. Got it running. Thing ran fine. He took off on a road trip of a few hundred miles, and getting into where he was going to, truck lost oil pressure and started clattering again. And of course, he called me, and I said, well, you probably had another one of these lifters fail. The oil pressure thing was kind of screwy to me because that could be a lot of other things. So got it back here, got it back home, got it to my shop, and we pulled it apart. And well, the deeper I got into the motor, the worse it got. So this is the DOD assembly. It uses it. The computer uses engine oil pressure and this solenoid assembly to send pressure through here, through supports in the block, to actuate these DOD lifters. If you want to know more about it, there's a lot better information out there, but that's the gist of how it works. So getting it apart the second time, I find one of these are stuck after I pulled it. We went ahead and pulled the engine because he had a rear main seal leaking, and the thing was piston oil everywhere. So if you got to pull both cylinder heads, you might as well pull the engine out, right? Get it out. I find this lifter was collapsed, which it seems to uncollapsed itself sitting here on my bench, on my desk. But that's what they're known for. They get stuck. Anyway, as far as oil pressure goes, I figure maybe it was bleeding by one of these places on this DOD plate. Now this is what it looks like from the top side. This goes underneath your intake manifold, basically in the valley. So first assumption is that it started pushing oil past this gasket here, which, you know, we did not replace this gasket because at the time this gasket was $150. So trying to save money, we thought we'd reuse it. So found that initially, thought okay, we're losing pressure here. Found the stuck lifter, I've already got it apart. I had to pull the pan anyway to reseal everything. I start grabbing rod bearing caps. And these two bearings here were on the number 4 rod. I wished I had the crank. But, you know, these bearings don't look horrible. I mean, they some scratches, but they look like they have 230,000 miles on them. That rod, actually, I could get movement just grabbing it by hand. A little clink, clink, clink. So I knew we had a problem at that point. Decided to go ahead and pull it down. Since I was doing number 4, let's pull number 3. It's on the same journal as the crank. And this is where things got ugly. As you can see, it's starting to chew that bearing up. And that, my friends, is straight lack of oil pressure. So, here's the top half of the bearing. You can see it's starting to peel metal. Still, this bearing never spun. I'll show you. It never spun in the rod. It's still got the tang on it. So still no real smoking gun there as far as where it lost oil pressure. And I was still, as I'm tearing this thing apart, I'm looking. Well, here's another bearing. And you can see, I mean, it's starting to melt metal. These are the main bearings. I don't have the worst main bearing, but you know, you can see it there, little globules right here. It's starting to move metal. Didn't spin any mains, but definite signs of things going bad. And when I pulled the number 3 main cap, which is the thrust bearing, the thrust surface was chewed all the way off on one side. And so I knew we had a problem. Well, the oil pump, I took it apart. It didn't fail. You know, they're crank driven on an LS, so I don't have any 100% smoking gun. Net result is we're replacing the camshaft, getting rid of all this DOD stuff, getting rid of this. I am pretty certain the oil pressure was lost from one of these. From this gasket not sealing to the oil bosses in the top of the block. So, and going back together with this, we're going to make some changes. So we're eliminating this. We're putting a BTR Racing, so to my mind, Truck Norris cam in it with new lifters, new valve springs. Crank is at the machine shop. They're going to tell me if they can grind it or not. If not, either way, I'm hoping they can do that crank at 1010, 10 under on rods, 10 under on mains, because I have a brand new set of King's bearings that are 1010 for an LS that I can use, again, to save him some money. So once I know more from the machine shop, we'll know whether they can turn the crank, or if I got to find a crank, or what's going on there. But yeah, so that's why the 09 GMC, and it's, you know, lifelong friend. He's in a jam. You know, auto repairs are expensive. Not that I don't need more shit to do, but you know, sometimes you stop what you're doing and help people if you got the ability, and I got the ability. So made a parts list, found everything without considering a crank and bearings and rings. The rings, the cylinders look great. I don't see any reason to change anything there. We're looking at about $500 in parts. So once I get the crank back, I'll do another video on that and probably add it to this. I don't know, but yeah. So she's a little tired, a little wore, got some owies, but anyway, guys, I'm going to move into the rest of the disassembly here and get the block all stripped down so I can get it clean. Back shortly. And, well, here it is all together. There's been various clips in this video of different assembly and rings and stuff like that. I didn't do a whole lot of showing the build of this motor because there's millions of other LS build videos on YouTube, and you're better off watching those for how-to than watching me. I'm strictly for entertainment unless you got questions. This is a 5.3. It is a flex fuel motor. It was the displacement on demand, which we eliminated. I showed you guys all the lifters and all that stuff. The top plate, that's all eliminated. This thing had lost oil pressure, and I'm pretty sure it was in that top displacement on demand solenoid plate. But anyway, the bearings were pretty, well, the thing was about to lock up. So it shoot up the crank, as you've seen the bearings. So couldn't get the crank machine, so we bought another one. And I'll put a link to where we got this crank. All the specifications were spot on perfect. When I measured everything out, and the polish on it was great. You know, it was exactly what it was advertised to be, and it came with King's bearings. It was $285 for a crank, so pretty cheap for a stock crank, even though it's a regrind. You know, this is not a hot rod motor. Now, we did put, or I did rather, put the Bryan Tooley Racing Truck Norris cam in this engine. That's what my buddy wanted, so that's what he gets. He ended up finding that on a good deal. So we got crank, rods and main bearings, new rings. I hand lapped the valves, new valve seals and shims, new different valve springs because you have to change valve springs when you upgrade the cam. New cam, new timing set, new oil pump, all new seals and gaskets. And nothing is fancy, nothing is, you know, race parts or anything like that. And I think he come in right around $1,000 in parts. So that's pretty cheap. I mean, nothing's cheap these days, but if you can get out of an LS for a ring job and a crank kit and all new gaskets and everything and a upgraded cam for $1,000, you know, that's pretty good. So anyway, I got to clean up the oil pan to put it on yet, and the balancer, water pump. Then we're gonna slap this bad boy in the truck and get him running. So stick around. We'll be bringing you back for putting that in here in a few minutes. Well, for you guys it'll be for a few minutes. For me, it's going to be a couple of days. Oh, come on. Hey. Well, got the engine in, got everything's buttoned up underneath, flex plate, starters in, wiring, cross members, got the front differential back in, axles are in, all that. Got the AC back on, got some hoses to connect, a little bit more wiring. Belt, still need to tighten this bracket down. Cooling, or the radiator and fans need to go back in, but we're close. Everything slid back in pretty easily. Sometimes these can be a fight because the engine sits so far back in the hole there. But I didn't do step by step on this because, again, an LS is an LS is an LS. So that's where we're at. I'm going to keep working here, and I'll probably bring you guys back for the startup, and we'll see how this rebuilt motor with the new Truck Norris cam runs. Alright, I'm going to keep working here, guys. Alright, guys, well, here it is. Startup. Alright, crank it up. we still haven't shut the DOD off in the computer, so the computer's a little bit pissed off. There it goes. But that's part of the process. You have to take it in and have a tune put in. It's trying to it keeps trying to deactivate the cylinders, but there it goes. So, sounds pretty good. No major rattles or anything. But if you're doing this DOD delete, you have to have a tune put in the computer to eliminate the programming that keeps trying to shut random cylinders off. But she's a runner. And it also doesn't want to idle very well, but that's not done by me. That's on to the next guy. So anyway, guys, well, that's the LS rebuild stuff thing. And you know, you can kind of do these on a budget if you pay attention to some details. And we even have managed to upgrade a few things in this. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. If you have any questions about what we did here or any of this stuff, feel free to ask. Stay greasy, my friends.